Penny, we've reached the stage where we're sort of seeing you, discovering you, 50, beginning to understand a little bit who you are. What led you into thinking that you might, what was the motivation for thinking about training to begin with, and leadership training especially?
My last husband had been involved in management training, and I used to attend a lot of the programs with him. He even occasionally let me do sort of half an hour of my own bit. Now, observing him in the very early days, I put him on a pedestal. I mean, he was a very good trainer, make no mistake. He was a good trainer. And I learned a lot watching him. But one of the things that, and it's probably what began to create the cracks in the marriage, was the more I observed, the more I thought there are some things here that I don't think are really very useful. And one of the, I suppose the main thing that really impacted me was people would leave those programs saying, absolutely brilliant, best program I've ever been on, all this great stuff. But when I looked at it, actually I thought, we're actually no better than any other consultants, because people still forget 80% of it within 6 weeks. And that's always been the challenge with training. Over the time that I was with Dennis, I obviously, and I seem to be very good at bringing clients in, even if I didn't do too much of the delivery. I was very good at building relationships with the clients and getting them interested enough to want to do something. So I realised that actually we had this same problem. They may think it was great fun and thoroughly enjoyed it, fantastic 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was, but were they really utilising it? Now, I think I'd already discovered in going through this transition that I had to do something that was meaningful for me. I couldn't do anything, I wasn't interested in doing something that would just earn money. I need to do something that really made a difference, if you like. That's what I cared about. And so when my marriage broke up and everything else and got no money, I did all sorts of weird and wonderful things in that time. And although they were very different, I think many of them contributed to my thinking, because I did not have a clear idea about what I wanted to do. I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but there was a sort of picture emerged.
Yes. What sort of weird and wonderful things?
I qualified in...
You can tell us, we won't. Well, we won't tell anybody. No.
I qualified in massage, in sports massage, in aromatherapy, reflexology, Reiki healing, something called Orozoma colour healing, and I qualified as a hypnotherapist. And there were two things that probably helped give me the insight into wanting to do something more. The one was hypnotherapy, and whereas I really enjoyed it, and it was hypnotherapy with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, one of the things that I began to think was, hang on a minute, people come along for hypnotherapy, and even if it works, it's me doing it for them. It's not them doing it for themselves.
I understand.
So that was a sort of thought that began to emerge. And then the colour healing, which was seriously weird and wonderful, and that was one of the more spiritual things I did. Have you ever heard anything about Orozoma? Do you know what Orozoma is?
No, we neither of us know.
Okay.
I know, she knows.
It's a set of bottles. You have a set of bottles, and the bottles, crystal bottles, about 2.5 inches deep, 3 inches maybe. I'm not very good at measurements. And they're full of oil and essence. And oil and essence doesn't mix, it separates. So the colours separate as well. So you've got 100 of these bottles. In fact, I think it's more now. 100 of these bottles, all different colours: red, yellow, blue, green, pink, blue, orange, mauve. Every colour you can imagine. And you can ask somebody to choose 4 bottles, and I could do a reading of their life at a physical, practical, mental, spiritual level. And this got heard about by one of the wives of somebody in the Young Presidents Organisation. And I suddenly found that I was being asked to go all over the world doing talks, which I have to admit scared the shit out of me, but going to places like Istanbul, Nigeria, all sorts of different places, Salzburg, to do these talks. And I used to get queues of people wanting readings, just non-stop. And it was the same thing. Now, the young presidents would have had me going on doing that for a long time. And I just became, disillusioned is too strong a word, but I thought, how much value is this really adding? It may be giving people an insight, but what are they doing with it? I want to be doing something that really makes a sustainable difference.
Yes.
Not, oh, wow, you've told me about my life, isn't
Yes.
that exciting?
Was it because most of that work was sort of retrospective rather than future looking? It was.
It was as I was doing it, I was beginning to become clear in my mind about, I love doing this, but it's not enough. I want to do more. So if you like, all the different things I'd done, whether it was healing, whether it was colour therapy, whether it was the training I'd done, observed before and done a really little bit of, it all coalesced to me saying, actually, there's something here I want to be doing that's more. And I began to think, could I design a program where people come on it, yeah, they enjoy it, but it becomes sustainable.
It occurs to me that in listening to these bits and pieces that as you described them that you did, there's a common core here from this young, rebellious, independent, vaguely dangerous sort of girl that you were. Each of the things that you did in this period of hypnotherapy, and they're all very caring. They're all for other people. Is this an intrinsic part of your thinking? 'Cause here we have somebody who wasn't sure whether they liked themselves, wasn't sure what they were all about, who admittedly was a bit of a people pleaser, still in a way, if I may put it this way, pleasing people. Did you find that the work that you were doing with hypnotherapy, for instance, was also an attempt to make other people feel better about themselves? Or was it because you thought that the hypnotherapy could change them? Or was it further than that hypnotherapy was effective, but it was still, as you actually put it, doing things for other people? I'm just trying to get a picture of the motivation behind the Penny the therapist at that stage, whether it was a self-fulfillment or whether it was a genuine need to help other people, or a mixture of both.
I think in the beginning, it was just that I want to help other people. That has never left me. Sometimes it's driven me down paths where I do things that are really unhelpful, but I didn't know it at the time.
That's what you
I'd keep wanting to give people advice and tell them what to do it for themselves. And that was a growing sense that I had, but it grew more and more, which is why all of this, as I said, almost came together at one time. I don't think any of those therapies, anything I did was an accident. They were all, I don't believe there's any such thing as coincidence.
No.
I think if you can begin to recognise that most of the things that happen in your life is because you've pulled them towards you and you need them in some way, shape or form, it's are you then able to take what you need from those experiences and do something useful. So I think it was as though whatever I worked with, if I was working with colours, if I was working with people, whatever I was doing, it was as though the clarity was emerging. So I still want to help people. I want to help people all the time. But the difference is I want to help them to help themselves.
Yes.
That's the huge difference.
Difference between empowerment and enabling. I mean, yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you have drawn on, perhaps all the experiences that we've discussed, you've drawn on. And is it also the case, and it's frequently said, isn't it, that when helping others, you help yourself? Did you find that this sort of transition from being a therapist per se to moving on to doing things that are more positive, is this a process of you're helping yourself and growing from within as you learn from other people, from therapy and so forth, as you learn more about yourself while you're helping other people?
I think that when I was doing, as you call the therapies, which was the aromatherapy and the, all the rest of it, that probably helped in terms of helping to heal me, because bear in mind all the time I was going through this,
Yes.
I was in huge recovery from Phil dying and trying to get my life back together. So there's no question that helped me. No question it helped me. I would say that over the next 18 years, which is where I am now, it's changed. And that is no longer that it's helping me in that way, healing me. It was more healing at that time.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't matter what I do. I never stop learning. Never.
No.
I learn when I deliver the program. I learn when I work with clients. I learn when I learn every day something. And it's my choice. Do I choose to take something from what I'm doing now? So I have grown beyond recognition. Was it to help me feel better about myself? I don't think that was even remotely part of my conscious thinking.
Okay, well, just a tiny bit more on this before we move on. The self-worth thing, which we mentioned earlier, do you feel that you're now recovering that degree of self-worth? Is it by helping other people that you effectively find yourself? This is what I'm trying to get at.
I don't think that belief ever goes away. And one of the things that, in fact, I'll share with you an experience that was kind of interesting. When people tell me, and as you, I think, know, we've now had something like, in fact, we were adding it up at our last meeting. I think it's nearly 40,000 people through our programme now, which is an incredible amount of people. When people tell me the programme's changed their life, I love it. I love it. I love it. But that's one step removed from me. When people say to me, you've changed my life, I'm significantly uncomfortable.
Yes.
Which tells me that belief still kicks in all the time. Now, I got asked to go and do a speaking engagement by the HR director. I think he's more senior now, but at the time he was HR director of Staples. And it was a type of speaking engagement which is a bit of a nightmare for me because it's about 350 people. Half of them have been through the programme, half of them hadn't. So wouldn't have a clue about what you're talking about. So you have to make it fit both, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It was also interesting that, and this is a complete aside, but was good fun. I was actually running a programme for a top team down in Southampton, and the speaking engagement was up in Birmingham. And this was on in the evening. There was no way I was going to get there in time, but they were very keen for me to get there. And somebody came up with a bright idea. Well, you know how you could get there quickly. You go up on the back of a motorbike.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Oh, good for you.
I got taken up on the back of a motorbike. Ewan still says he missed a trick. He should have had me go straight up on stage on the back of the motorbike.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, so I went there, but Ewan said to me at the end of the evening, he said, Pen, I know you fairly well. He said, I've never seen you so uncomfortable. He said, you got a standing ovation when you went up on stage, as well as came off. But he said you had people queuing up to see you with your book, asking to sign you, and they were almost in awe of you. He said you couldn't handle it. He said you went to bed early.
Penny, one of the things that is commonly talked about when people have had tragedies in their life and incredible hardship is this theory of the rock bottom. That you have to know how far you can't go any further, therefore you can only go upwards. Now, you must have got fairly close to rock bottom, I would imagine. Do you find, do you think that you have to reach a rock bottom in order to get back a bit? Can you see the rock bottom coming and therefore prevent yourself from hitting it? But most of all, where did this ability to be able to sort of claw your way back up come from? I can understand that it's about helping people, and that's clear and obvious. But it takes a lot of inner resolve and strength too. Where did that come from? What?
Tony, that is a question I just can't answer. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't even know if it's intrinsically part of me. If anybody can find it, I really find that very difficult to answer. I know that it doesn't matter what happens to me, I will always bounce back. There have been times in my life where I have had to think, I'm not sure I can come back from this. But if you have anything anywhere in your life that you feel is worth coming back for, and of course my rock bottom was when Phil died. And I found that very difficult. And part of the reason I found it so difficult was wondering if I could have done things differently. I asked myself, would I have been different if I hadn't had 5 other children? I can't answer the
No,
question.
no.
I don't know. I do know that it was that awful feeling of, God, I'm such a bad example to them. You know, and it's crazy really, because I wasn't bad all the time. I was a fantastic housewife. I ran an amazing house. You know,
I'm
lots
sure.
of things I did well.
Yeah.
But I was always inclined to focus all the time on what I did badly and how could I make it better. So I don't know where
But
that
this
came
is
from.
a shift, isn't it? From we talked earlier about people's propensity for blaming everybody else other than themselves for what. Here you're almost sort of looking at yourself and not perhaps blaming, but asking yourself, could I have done more? And that too is part, surely, of the growth of the leadership programs, of the training programs. And I assume that you're asking people to look at themselves and say, how can I do more? There must be a lot of people possibly watching this program who feel that there comes some sort of managerial bottom. You know, they're struggling to improve and perhaps blaming the company or their colleagues. It's the same thing, is it not, that you then look to yourself and say, actually, what can I do?
Yeah, and it really is, and I don't want to overemphasize the blame that I felt, but I do remember that must have been about 2 years after Phil died. I'm not very good at time, but I think it was about that. I watched the film A Beautiful Mind. That's a true story.
Yes.
There's somebody who was able to deal and handle schizophrenia.
Yes.
And I asked myself time and again, could I have done more to help Phil? So it was that really rocked me. But I used to believe, because the way you've asked the question, there's so many answers, different ways I could answer the question. I used to believe that one had to hit a rock bottom to be able to change, that you had to have had a horrific experience. The thing that I've discovered, which has been exciting and amazing for me, is a lot of people can come on the programme and dramatically change their life that may not be that bad, but a lot of room where they'd like to change it. And they turn their life around without hitting a rock bottom. So, and that's luck that I discovered that in the programme. You know, it's luck. But I do think that to have, you know, everybody, Tony, there's nobody alive who hasn't had some shit experiences in their life. You've had some, you know, we all have. There's nobody who hasn't. That's almost, so what? We can either choose to carry it around like a bag of shit and tie it to us and never put the damn thing down, or we can say, hang on a minute, that happened.
Yes.
So what am I now going to do about it? How do I now want my life to be? And am I constantly going to be doing this and saying, I've got to rely on everything outside of me, or am I going to say, what can I do? You know, I was in a pretty bad space at that time. I'm now in a very different place.
Yes, yes.
And have I had people around who've been supportive? Yes. Have there been some people who tried to stop me because they were so worried that I could make it even worse, because they cared? They thought, my God, you're stretching yourself and this could make it worse. You know, there was so much stuff going on. But I do think reaching a rock bottom and giving you a real serious wake-up call is pretty powerful.
Yeah, yes.
But for some people, that can knock them completely, and they don't see how they can get up again.
The interesting thing, I mean, the rock bottom line, I accept that not everybody has to hit one. The trick is to know when you're heading towards one. But the interesting thing was, did I have a good team around me? And one of the things that occurs to me is that you sort of make this fight back, as you have, into your lovely place that you are now. Was it the ability to actually to be able to lean on other people, to look at a team and say, actually, I need your help as much as you need me? Is this what I'm trying to get at is, what's the fabric of the theory behind the leadership program and all of the programs that you have, the management programs? Is it this sort of wonderful human fabric of being able to say, actually, I need help and I'm not afraid to ask for it anymore because I'm beginning to feel more comfortable about myself. I don't feel somehow diminished by asking for help and by being able to, you know, be more open.
Right, there are two different things there, okay? Right. One is about asking for help, the other is about being more open.
Yes, I accept two different things. Yeah.
So the first thing I'd say is, I would say it's only in the last year that I've really begun to have the ability to honestly ask for help. It's never been a strength of mine to be able to do that. I've always felt I need to do it on my own. At times, stupidly. Have I had support around me in terms of friends who've always been there, and I have one or two good friends. Hazel has been in my life now for whatever it is, I don't know, 35 years, and she's fantastic. But there's also a difference between asking for help and support and being able to connect with people.
Yes.
And one thing I've been unbelievably lucky with is I seem to be able to connect with people. And I think I seem to be able to connect with people exceptionally. Whether it's just a gift I've been given, whether it's because I care so much about people that they sense it and feel it, I really don't know. Some of my clients I have the most amazing connections with. And I think that has been its own support, whereas I haven't had to ask for support. It's almost been there by being created, but in a different way.
But that's being open, though, isn't it? That's being aware, and that's being ready to accept input from other people.
Yes.
But you still have a problem with the whole issue of asking for help, I can detect.
I do.
In management terms, wouldn't that sometimes be suggested to be sort of a feeling of insecurity, that if I ask him for help, he seemed to be cleverer than I am, therefore I've, sort of lessened my own standing?
It could. I'm absolutely sure you're right, Tony. I don't like to admit it, but I'm absolutely sure you're right. But one of the things that, and this is one of the things I am proud of, although it does occasionally bite me in the bum, and it comes back to what you asked about being open. I've worked with, observed, seen a lot of consultants, and a lot of the time, however bright they are, what they do is they stand out in front and tell you what to do differently to improve your life in some way.
Yes.
Your business, your project management, your leadership, your whatever the hell it happens to be. Now, they don't often tell you who they are. And I don't mean in terms of qualifications and abilities and skills.
But the real them.
I mean the real them. This is who I am. This is where I learned what I learned. This is where I screwed up. And I decided to make a very conscious decision very early on. Am I prepared to stand out there and say, this is who I am? And the choice I made was that, yes, I would. And it bites me in the bum a few times, because if I'm out there telling people the saga of my life, so that I'm saying this is how I began to learn about responsibility, and you're on stage in front of 400 or 500 people, 90% of them are men in IT or finance, you can see them sitting there going, oh my God, too much information. Oh God, I don't need to know all this. But you may impact that 10% quite considerably. And I've had to make a conscious choice. If that's the reaction of a percentage of people, and I have to say it's quite small now, but if that is the reaction of a percentage of people, am I going to allow that to change me, or am I going to continue to live by my values and have the courage to still say this is who I am? For example, I now do act as coach to some very senior people. And I remember the very first time I went to meet somebody who was one of my favourite clients, but sadly is now dead, Scott Davidson. He was CEO of ICI Acrylics, and a very special guy. And a person in HR said she thought I'd be great for him as a consultant, as a coach.
Yes.
And I remember going out to meet him in Brussels, the very first time I met him. And I went over there, and one of the first questions he asked me is, what qualifications have you got?
Yeah.
And I said, I haven't got any.
Yeah.
And he was shell-shocked. And I was very open about who I am. I said, this is who I am. And he did work with me, and he was a fantastic client. I adored him. But I never, ever want to pretend to be something I'm not.
Absolutely, I understand that. But this is the essence, perhaps, of the program, because in a way, you're doing the old sort of the colonel-in-chief things. I'd never ask my chaps to do what I wouldn't do myself. You're asking people, I assume, and we will come to this in a minute, the programs, the training programs, the leadership programs that you run, are pretty much about understanding yourself and being honest about yourself and looking for the flaws and be prepared to admit them. And you're doing this by example, aren't you? I mean, for the people watching today, this is really what we're doing. We're showing the inner Penny, that you're prepared to look at yourself and reveal yourself, so to speak, and encourage other people to be able to do the same, because I'm getting the idea that a lot of the basis of your training comes from people being able to have a good look at themselves, not everybody else, not blaming their circumstances or any other sort of extraneous things, but look at themselves and think, if I want to do better, what could I do to myself to make myself better? Is that the sort of hub of it?
It is that. And the interesting thing is, and I'll tell you a little bit about the program, but the interesting thing is that when I look at that program, it never ceases to amaze me, the impact that it has, never. Because I actually think all it is teaching downright basic common sense. It's just not common practice. There's nothing new there. It's really bringing back to people's conscious awareness that which they already know. And it is about being open. I mean, it's absolutely mesmerising to me that, and sometimes we work with integrated teams from the same company.
Yes.
Sometimes we work with people from a company who are different levels, different areas, different everything. Sometimes we work with people from different companies altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things we do, the very first thing, is get people to say who they are.
Yes.
And because of the way we ask them to do it, they really do say, this is who I am. And it's absolutely fascinating. You can get people sitting in that room who say, God, I've worked with you for 20 years. I didn't know that about you. And you think, how can people not recognise the importance of knowing the human being that you're going to be working with? And it's fascinating. But I often think, and I don't run personally that many programs now, except for really top teams. But the interesting thing is, always before I go to run one, I'm actually quite nervous, and I think, they're all going to know this stuff. I know they are. They're going to know this stuff. They never bloody do. And I think, hang on a minute, how come that it is common sense? That's all it is. So it's very much, and it's about getting them to have the courage to be open. But it's not making anybody do it. It's their choice how much they say.
When you're doing the courses, and we have presumably this essence of the old phrase of honesty, openness and willingness, and people accepting when they say who they are, they presumably have to do it pretty candidly.
They don't have to, Tony.
It works better if they do it candidly.
It certainly can do, but it's entirely their choice. So when you get a team that opens up, and one of the clients I work with now, who I love, I've worked with the particular CEO in different, when he's been in other companies as well. He always will follow me. So I will introduce myself first. He will always go next and be remarkably open, so that as the CEO, people, it's almost as though he's giving them permission to do the same.
Yes.
And, you know, it's fascinating to see it. Fascinating to see. You know, there was a program that I was with him recently, and with his new team, somebody new had come on board. And of course, the rest of the team, it was bringing somebody in who needed to be integrated. So we did all the introductions again. And this individual said something that left all of us reeling. And we all said, oh, God! Where he said he'd got married at 16 to somebody at 14. And they had to get permission from the court to do it. And we're all sitting there going, oh my God! You know, and this is a very senior director. And you just wouldn't imagine that something like that would come out. Can you imagine how your perception of somebody then changes?
Yes.
It's fascinating.
I'd say.